Hi and good morning everybody. Welcome to our Opera 3 refresher course. Really the aim of this session is to go through the little areas that Opera 3 brought in terms of improvements. So what we're looking at is from the upgrade from Opera 2 to Opera 3, what enhanced features were brought into Opera 3 that many people probably don't yet fully use or have possibly been shown. And it's really to remind everybody that those options are there and are available for people to use. My name's Rachel Gray. If we haven't spoken or met before, I'm the Technical Services Manager here at HBP. I've also been working with Pegasus for over 10 years. So if you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to use the chat and I will answer the questions as we go forward. And obviously, if there's anything afterwards, just feel free to let me know. Right, can everybody hear and see the screen? Great, thanks for that, Mike. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start with the general navigation of Opera. So when you first log into Opera 3, very often you log in and you are presented with the ribbon bar. Now, the ribbon bar was a new function that was brought into Opera 3 from Opera 2, which I'm sure most of you are fully aware of and see on a daily basis. What they did, however, is again put a few new features in here that can make life easier, can bring on efficiencies for companies, which I think on everybody's time is a great utilization of resource. And that actually comes in the bar of favorites. Now, what the favorites bar allows you to do is to pin tasks, to pin reports, and to pin processes of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So essentially using this as your initial platform for your processing on day-to-day. So what we're going to do is within financials, so what we'll say is I generally use the sales processing, cash book, and possibly fixed assets. So if you hover over the icon, right click, you can click add to favorites. What this allows you to do is potentially have a number of different options within sales that you run. So we'll group that item by sales, and I'm happy to keep it as the processing. Select OK. Now, if we go back to the favorites bar, what we then see is that sales processing option. Click on it and it works exactly as you would expect it if you were actually using the sales ledger area itself. What you can then do is there may be then a number of reports that you always run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over report, right click, and select add to favorites. Again, I'm happy with the group and I'm happy with the display name, so I can select OK. It might well be we also have receipts and adjustments, so we can right click add to favorites. And what you will see is we're building up our processes for a one area where we don't have to navigate around the system as much. So I also want my debtors report. And let's say then we also want cash book processing. On the supply chain management tab, we then may also want the sales order processing. So in here, I'm actually going to name it SOP and possibly stock. So in a few short clicks, what we have done is we've built up our favorites bar. And as you can see, those processes are then available for absolutely everybody to use. And they work in the exact same way as any report. And so what we're trying to do there is streamline those navigation pauses, those clicks away from the system where you've got a full dashboard essentially of what you would like to use. Now, what we can also do in the favorites bar is actually reorder it. So if you've added quite a lot of options on there, we have this little icon at the top next to the help button, which is if we hover over is the reorder menu. So it might then well be that when you first log into Opera, you would like to see this favorites bar before anything else. So what I've done is I've hovered over that line and dragged it to the top, and I'm going to select OK to that. What that automatically does is, as you can see, it reorders the ribbon bar. So it's those small enhancements that we can bring in that can make life really just a little bit easier in terms of processing in Pegasus. What we can also do in the reorder is we can actually select a specific section. So if we say Action and Reorder Favourites, I can then say, well, actually, I would like my cash book and my sales ledger next to each other with SOP and stock first. So again, depending on how you viewed it, exactly what sections that you've added to the favourites bar. So it gives a lot more functionality into this area. If we select OK, again, that's reordered. So you can see the SOP, the stock processing, the cash book, and the sales. And you can continue to build this favourites bar with whatever is required. So we can then go back into supply chain management. Under reports, we might want our issues report. So we can right click, add issues report, and select OK. And automatically it gets added to that option, as we can see here under stock issues. So a lot of the features and functionality that were brought into Opera 3 are very much around navigation. The small things that actually we can find make quite a big difference. What we also brought in was the administration tab, was an option for scheduling. Now, many people may not have seen this option or not really thought about utilising what's available, but it is a great option for sending messages to users within Pegasus. We can also lock the system out. So if we're, for example, running a period end at 4 o'clock, you can lock people out from 4 till 5 to ensure that nobody can log in and cause problems while the period end's running. And what we can also do, which I think is a great function within Opera, is actually have the ability to close people out of Pegasus. And I'm sure many people have the same query where we need everybody out at 4 o'clock for a period end. And obviously, usually when we're running a period end, everybody would like to take a backup. Now, backups, as you should know, require exclusive access. So if people are processing in my Orion Vehicles company, I will not be able to take a backup. What the scheduling system will allow us to do is actually identify who's logged in. It might be specific people we need to log out. It might be the entire company. We can then choose a time when they will be closed, and we can lock them out for a certain period. So where we're picking up the phones, ringing people, asking people to log off, it saves a lot of time in actually having that option available. And what it also does is it will allow us to send messages to people. So we'll have reminders, maybe in 1 hour, the system is scheduled to shut down. Please make sure that all of your work is completed. Again, 5 minutes before, we'll have a reminder. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through that process with everybody today to show how that can be implemented. So under the administration tab, we have scheduling, and we have 4 options in here. We've got messaging, shutdown, task scheduler, and calendar. The first option we're going to go through is messaging. So what this allows us to do is there might be some information that you need people to be aware of. For example, if we are back processing, so let's say I want to set my date to be the 31st of May. I can have a message that appears to everybody when they log into Opera to say, please remember to change your system date to the 31st of May. It might be we're running a stock take. Please remember we're running a stock take on such and such date. So while I'm in the messaging screen, to create a new message, we hit the Create New icon down in the bottom left-hand corner. And we can then give it a title. So I'm going to call mine a stock take reminder. Now I can then say, when do I like this to run? So it might be we run a stock take on a monthly basis. And it also may be that it's usually the last working day of the month. So as you can see here, I can choose dates, the last day of the month. I could choose weekly, and there we have the Sunday to Saturday. We can choose daily, so to repeat every set number of days, or we can choose once, which is really just an ad hoc message. I'm going to select once. I'm going to ask it to appear today. I'm going to ask it to run at 10:15. And my little active tick box allows me to say that this message is truly going to run, whereas you can have messages stored that you can activate and deactivate whenever you wish. We then have an expiry time, so how long does this message show as valid for? And we can then put some extra options in here. So, hi all, please be aware that today is stock take day. Any issues from stock, please advise. Now, once we've got that, if we hit preview, what that does is it shows us what's actually going to happen. So at 10:15, all of the users physically logged into Opera at the time will get a little pop-up in the right-hand corner. If we drop that option down, we can see the message, and then we can close that as well. But what you can do is, with that actually not expiring for 2 hours, that is still active. So if anybody logs in, logs out, it will continue to show for that 2-hour period. Once I've created the base message, I'm then going to save the record, and we can then look at distribution. So what we then want to identify is who or which companies we would actually like to notify. If you have multiple companies, it might be that only one company is having a stock take. Therefore, you can certainly streamline the information and messages that you're sending out. What I'm first going to do is go to users and groups. So I'm going to say, well, actually, it's only Mr. Smith and HBP, who we're logged in currently, that will actually be affected. So we can untick these options and choose specifically the people that it will affect and select OK. What we can also do is, you can see at the moment it's intended for all companies. We can go back into users and groups and change that, or we could choose a specific company rather than users. So anybody logged into a company at any one time will receive the message. So because 5:15 or 10:15 has changed, I'm going to change that to 10:17, save that record and close. Now what it'll do is it'll process in the background. So if you ever wanted to have a look at what we've got scheduled and what's happening, we can select the calendar option within scheduling, and all tasks, all messages and all activities are all logged within this calendar as well, because multiple people can have multiple access to this area. So we can see today highlighted in red, we do have a stock take reminder. We can also have a look at previous months, and anywhere where you've got a bold or red option will show what's been added to the system. I'm going to close out of there, and while that schedule is pending, what I'm also going to do is have a look at the shutdown and lockout options. So this is where not only can we send messages, we can do certain actions in terms of locking out and shutting down the physical users in our system. So again, to create a new record, we've got the create new icon. And I'm going to say this is our weekly backup. When would I like it to occur? Well, with it being weekly, I want to change my frequency to weekly, select a Friday, and what I would like it to do is run at 7 o'clock in the evening after everybody has left for the day. Now, we may have people still working in the system, which is why the shutdown and lockout comes into its own. Now, what I'm actually going to do is change my time for 10:30. So we can actually see what this is going to do. And I'm going to ask it to lock out only. What we're also going to do is we're going to say how long we would like to lock out for. So really, I only want it to lock out for 5 minutes, possibly. The option is yours. And what you can see automatically is that expiry is not available to change because it is valid for 2 hours. And as the lockout increases, that will automatically increase as well. We can then say, as per a message, and we can hit save. Again, the exact same process in messaging and shutdown. What we can then also say is it possibly applies just to certain companies. So in actual fact, I only want it to apply to Orion vehicles. And if we go back into users and groups, I could also say it only applies to certain people. Now, what the lockout does is automatically, after 5 minutes, the administrator can log back in. So that's in case there are any problems where we need to stop that lockout. But it is only the administrator that has that option. I've unticked the administrator here just purely because I want to be able to log straight in, not just after 5 minutes. However, if I tick that option on, the administrator could still disable that after the 5 minutes of lockout. I'm going to say OK to that message, and I'm going to close our shutdown. And what you can see is as we've been processing, our stock take reminder has actually populated. So if we drop this option down, hi all, stock take reminder. So it's a great option. If we log out of our system and log back in, again, I'm going to log in as HBP because that was the user who we activated our stock take message for. Automatically, because I've relogged back in, that message appears. And there are multiple messages that can appear at any one time, making it a great function for those notifications that need to be available. Now, if I actually changed my user, so I wanted to log in as the admin user, admin, we chose not to have that message appear. So by logging in, the message doesn't appear. So you've got that flexibility and ability to see exactly what is required. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log back in as HBP. And relog into our scheduling calendar. So because I've now created a weekly task, as you can see, every week is in bold and it shows me the tasks. So again, a great platform to identify what tasks and scheduling has been set up. If we don't want one of those messages to run, we can come into the section, so scheduling messages. And if we go to the list, we have our stock take reminder. And we could deactivate by ticking that option off. What that allows you to do is this might be a message that you use often, but possibly not on a set schedule. So you can come back in, deactivate it, and when you're ready, you can change the date, change the time, and reactivate it. That is exactly the same when it comes to the lockout and shutdown. So if I have a look at my list, so I've got a weekly backup running every Friday, and a second backup also running every Friday. Now this is the one I changed to 10:30, so what I'm going to do is change this to once and actually amend the dates to today. And I'm going to change it for 10:21. Now what this does is, because I've only asked it to lock out, I could continue processing, so I could stay in the system. However, if I close out and relog back on again, I will be prevented from going into the system. So what I'm going to do is actually try that exact process. So if we close out of Opera completely, again, as you see, those notifications automatically close when we've finished in Pegasus. And we'll try and log it back in again. And as you see, automatically tells us, as per our weekly backup, the system is unavailable. Please try again later. Now, if you know your backup or the lockout is going to be for 30 minutes, you could put a date and time on that to allow people to know when they can retry. Now, once that has finished, people will be able to log straight back in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as the admin user. And because I kept us ticked on, it tells us there's something in process, but it does still allow us in. Under Administration, Scheduling and Shutdown, I can then find my task and deactivate it. Click Save and Close. So if we try and relog back in now as HBP, who was a user we did notify couldn't log in, that's allowed us straight back into the system. So it is a great tool to kind of keep that processing neat and tidy in terms of getting users out of the system. Now, like we were saying earlier, it might not be just a lockout that you require. It might be a shutdown as well. So we have potentially batch processing scheduled and you run that as an exclusive process. It might be again a backup is needed or even a period end. So we can make sure at a set time and date, everybody will be closed out of Pegasus or those you wish to actually select. What we're first going to look at is how that runs. So I'm going to close out of this area. And under System Utilities, we have an option for System Preferences. Now, this is where our reminders on shutdown are actually set up, and these can be defined by yourselves, and it is a global basis. So what I'm saying here on this bottom option is, if I create a shutdown, When would I like the reminders to be sent out? So we can add notifications for certain times, but we also want to remind people that that's happening. The reason being is the shutdown does control the process of closing applications. It does ensure there isn't any data loss or data corruption because processes are cancelled. However, if, for example, we were in the process of creating an invoice and we hadn't saved it, it would roll back those changes, which is why really we need these reminders to ensure people are aware that this shutdown is going to occur and give them time to advise if it needs to be changed in case there is anything major happening. So I'm going to leave my reminders for 10 and 5 minutes. And then I'm going to come back into scheduling and shutdown. And this time I'm going to create a shutdown option. So let's go for a daily invoicing run. So you could say daily, repeat every 1 day, repeat however often you wish. And it might be here that we want to shut down at 10:30. Now, what we're then being asked is, okay, if we're shutting down, how long do we want to prevent people from logging into the system? I'm happy with 20 minutes. And again, the show options. So how active is this message and reminders going to be? How long will they pop up for as a reminder? And what I'm also going to say is a little message. So, hi. Our message, and again we save the record so we can then go on to our action and distribution. So again, what I'm going to say is it's only my Orion Vehicles company I wish to affect. And then I'm also going to choose our users and groups. So there might be certain areas of the system that you allow, maybe purchase processes that aren't going to actually affect your SOP side and your sales side. So you can make sure that they're not affected. So again, what I'm going to do is I am going to simply just affect the HBP user, but the manager, the administrator, and Mr. Smith may be allowed to carry on. And select OK. That's now set up to run as per those settings. And again, what we can do is a great preview on the calendar, see exactly what's going to happen. So now I've got my daily invoicing run. It shows me everything that's going to be happening. And inactive messages as well. So if we had potentially anything else that's going to run, we've also got those options as well to see exactly what's been happening. Now, while that process and shutdown run, are there any questions at all anybody has on that section? Great. Well, what I'm going to do is I will actually continue on while that's processing. And we're going to take a look actually at the task scheduler. Now, this is a great option for certain processes and activities that you wish to be run out of hours that doesn't affect obviously yourself having to sit at your desk and run them, and can be run while everybody has finished their work. So the task scheduler is an option in here that allows us to create a brand new task out of a defined list specified by Pegasus. And those task types can be seen. So we've just selected the new task icon. And in the task type, we've got a drop down. So these are the options we can actually have scheduled. So we've got an update data structures, which is the system often used by support in terms of running version upgrades and also checking the data. We've got a backup database. So again, we could have it where a backup runs on a nightly process that is out of hours. And we've also got our period ends for the nominal ledger, the sales ledger, and the purchase ledger. So it really targets those applications that are going to require people to be logged out of the system. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose an update data structures. You can call it a task name. That's really defined in the data, and then we can say what this physically is. So a UDS for a weekly data update. And very much like you saw in the lockout and shutdown and also messages, we've got the schedule. So I'm going to say on a specific date. We can choose the date, and we can also choose the time. So this might be something that doesn't even run until very late on. Again, just in case anybody is in or just in case anybody has kept themselves logged in, you can choose a number of options. So this one might require to shut everybody down just in case. And we can also say which companies are going to be affected and also the options that are contained within that update. And hit save. So I created a backup yesterday, and as we can see, that backup ran successfully at 1350. So any tasks you run, you can come into this area and actually see exactly when they last ran and how that was successful. What we could also do here is not only run individual processes, but we could actually chain them together. So it might well be you've run your reports, you've run your transfers into the nominal ledger for your period end processes, and what you actually want to do is take a backup, run your sales period end, run your purchase period end, and then run your nominal period end. So we can actually chain all those events together so that if one is not successful, it stops the rest, and also make sure they're all completed in a timely fashion together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another new task, and this time the first one I'd want it to be as a backup. And I'm going to say it can be included in chains, so it takes away the options to schedule. I'm then going to say the companies I wish, and also am I excluding the additional files, which if it's just a data backup is the safest option. And select save. So there is our period end backup. So I'm going to create a new task, and let's say it's our sales ledger period end. Again, I want it to be included in chains. I only want it on Orion vehicles. And do I want it to zeroize turnover, block nominal postings if we're using open period accounting? And I've also got the period end date. So let's say that was be the 31st of June, or May, should I say. Now, what you'll find is Opera has actually, while we've been processing that option, closed us out. Now, the scheduling editor is actually a separate application that isn't affecting the data, so it does actually allow us to continue. But that shutdown and lockout has just completely closed any other application we were running in Pegasus. And if we try and log back in, it advises there's a lockout period due to a process. But again, we can log in as a user that wasn't included in that and continue working. So what I'm going to do here is on my shutdown, it might be that's completed. I'm going to deactivate it. And it will allow us to log back in as HBP. And back into administration and task scheduling. We now have our sales ledger period end and our backup. And then I'm going to create another new task, but this time it's to chain those reports and options together. I'm going to choose, is it a specific day of week or a specific day of the month? So let's say we want it to be the last day of the month. We can also again put in shutdown messages. So we want to shut everybody down at a certain time. And then we can actually add the options that we want to include. So I'm going to say, right, well, the first thing I want to do is take a backup. And then the next thing I want to do is run a period end. And as you can see automatically, if there are any errors in any of those stages, it will stop the process. And then we can save. And there is our chained scheduled task ran. So hopefully many people there can see a great benefit in task scheduling, but also that messaging and shutdown to utilise logging people out of the system successfully without the need to be waiting, calling people and ensuring that they're all set. So that's really the end of the scheduling section. And before I move on more onto some more of the navigational areas, has anybody got any questions? Great, so we'll continue on. So away from the scheduling section, what you saw was within there a number of options which defined user profiles and also user permissions. So in the administration section, this is where your user profiles are created. So if there are any users we need to set up, this is the area in which to do it. Now you have to be a manager of Opera in order to do this option, which is this manager tick box we see here. So if we go to list and to HBP, as you can see, these options are available because the administrator is the global admin for the system that cannot be amended. But for my HBP user, I defined I had manager rights. So just as a reminder, what manager rights gives us is the availability to run backups, to run update data structures, and to also see such items as stock cost prices, and also do a number of updates on stock. Now, what we also had is make a member of a user group. So in the scheduling process, you might have 30 or 40 users, and in there you have departments. And often in messaging and shutdowns, you only really need to affect certain departments. So the great area here is that we can actually create groups of people to add them to a department. So in user groups, which is system maintenance and user groups, we can create a new item called sales. And from here, if we save the record, we can actually add members. So I would like the HBP user to be a member. If we close and then go back into maintenance and user profiles, what we can then see, if we have a look at our HBP user, is I am now a member of sales, so possibly not the accounts department. So where we were seeing groups, that's how the groups actually works on that area of the system. So back onto navigating. So one of the great things about Opera 3 again, which we've seen a lot of already, is the navigation pane, which is the ribbon bar. So very much like your latest Office products in the ribbon bar functionality, it keeps things up to date and it makes it easy for access and also navigation. Now, one of the little things that they actually added was a lot of shortcuts in terms of navigation, and that's what we're going to look at now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the sales processing screen. Now, the difference between Opera 2 and Opera 3 when it comes to the processing screens is not too different. And the great thing about that is when it then comes to understanding the system, it's only the enhancements that really need to be focused on because the processing, the screens, the fields available have been migrated into the Opera 3 system for ease of use. But what it allows us to do is such things as, if we have a mouse scroll button, I can hover over this banner and I can mouse scroll from this section. And what we can also do is any icons down at the bottom, we now have that double click functionality, which I think a lot of people automatically thought was possible in Opera 2, would try it, and unfortunately no screen would pop open. So it's a little feature they've added. For those people that maybe don't use the notes on such items as the sales process, in the purchase process, in the stock, this is a great area to manage certain notifications. As we can see, there's a date that's raised anytime a statement to this customer is used, and it also includes items when the customer's been on stop. So as soon as the stop button is selected for a customer, a note is added to notes. And what you can also do is create a new note. Might be a request for a statement. We can say a date, a priority, who in the system we actually want to action that for, and also is there a due date. pop a note in there for the information, and that note is available. So it's that double-click functionality that they've now brought in. And one of the things about navigation which was in Opera 2, but again, it's about understanding and also reminding people of those options, are the double-click functions on these icons. So we can double-click current balance and it takes us into the transaction screens. So anywhere you see the icons against a field, there is the double-click functionality there to open those options up. Now what we've also got in the sales processing screen and also the purchase processing screen. So a lot of these functions are completely across the board in terms of modules, where we've got the double click functionality and also the mouse scroll functions. But they've actually added two great new features into Pegasus Opera 3 in the sales and purchase ledger, which is the ability to rectify allocations. Now, I'm sure those people on Opera 2 used to be aware if we raised an invoice and then put a payment against it, the problem would be is if that was incorrect value or the payment's being allocated against the wrong invoice, we would have to then create a credit note, create a refund, allocate the two together, and it would really look like quite a messy ledger. So what this allows us to do is we can either deallocate transactions, so we can remove the allocation from the invoice, and we can actually fully remove adjustments, receipts, and payments. So what I'm going to have a look at is I'm going to search for a date range. Now this is demo data, so there's not a huge amount of data in here, so I'm going to leave my dates blank. But by selecting a date range, what you're saying is show me all transactions that have been allocated to something within this date range, within this period, or within today's transactions, and hit next. What I then have is a full list of all the transactions that have been allocated, and we can see the allocation numbers here which show what is actually linking. If you double click on any one of these transactions, it will automatically select those that are linked. So what we have here is we have two invoices and two receipts. So by selecting this line, what I have options to do is that I can either deallocate both receipts from the invoices, therefore showing the invoices outstanding, or I could actually physically remove the receipt. But what I'm first going to do is just purely deallocate. So I'm going to make a note of our invoice, INV 01549, and hit next. So what it then shows us is, okay, you've just selected this option. These are the 4 transactions that are going to be affected. And for audit purposes, we need to make a comment. I'm just going to put test, but this is really as to why you're doing this process. So it may be the receipts need to go to a different invoice, the receipt value is possibly wrong. And then we can select start. As in Opera, you always get, are you sure you wish to proceed? And then we have the publish screen to allow us to either print or file away a report of what's going to be affected, as you can see. Once I'm happy with that, I have the option to select finish. And now, do I actually want to reallocate the transactions? So do I want to go back into the reallocation process, or do I want to just close this screen and continue processing elsewhere? What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say no, because then what we can do is we can look at the current balance. We can do a find in this section. In fact, I think we're actually highlighted the item in question, and we've now got a balance. So what that's showing us is this invoice was quite possibly a number of allocations made against it, and the one allocation we've removed has allowed there to be a balance. What we also have is a number of later transactions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and post a receipt. I'm going to put the overpayment on account, so we have an invoice that has been allocated. So then under action, we can go to rectify allocations. I have just created an allocation. I'm going to say today, and as we can see, that invoice is there. If we select the line, it may well be that receipt should not have been on that invoice at all, possibly the wrong account, possibly the wrong date. So what we have the option, now we've actually ticked these lines, is to tick Remove Allocated Transactions. Now with invoices and credit notes being legally binding documents essentially, you don't have the function to remove those from the ledger, but you can remove receipts, payments and adjustments. And that doesn't just wipe them off the system, it does it in a correct process for auditing purposes, as well as ensuring the nominal and cash book postings are created as well. So I'm going to say next. And because I'm creating a nominal posting, what is my posting date? And then also the reason why. So as we can see, it's again confirming this value is going to be removed. So we can keep this for our records. As you can see, it's also confirming what the cash book entry was for the original transaction. And we can select Finish. So if we go back onto our current balance screen now, that receipt is no longer there. If we then have a look in the cash book, if you have the cash book module, and also the nominal can be viewed as well. We actually have the receipt and it's automatically posted a refund. So it ensures that the entire process for audit purposes and maintaining data is completely followed, but at the same time keeping that sales and purchase ledger clear of any transactions that should not be on there. Now, you can probably then see that sometimes in reporting purposes, you may need to find out why at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, if multiple people are using this option. So within reports, we do have a report called Rectified Allocations. And again, we can set our date range and we can also ensure we're looking at removed transactions. So as you can see there, it will list all of the deallocations and removal of transactions that has occurred in that period. Does anybody have any questions on that rectify allocation process? Just a reminder, the mute button is selected, so if you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat option on the area and I will certainly reply to that straight away. Okay, so for those that possibly weren't on my webinar last month when we went through reporting, a lot of the options we went through again were actually only included in Opera 3. So I'm just going to do a quick run through of some of those options that came to light when Opera 3 was brought in. And again, one of the great functions was the ability to export data to Excel. So any report within the system that has this option is available to be used. So let's actually jump to the purchase ledger instead and go to reports, and I may want to select my invoice and credit notes report. Again, we have the usual output in terms of dates and periods. And it's this drop down that defines if the report I'm running is available to export to Excel. What it will do is if we drop the option down to Excel report, it automatically asks to save the file. So it will be created in the background of Opera 3, but you can change that location with the ellipses here. And I'm going to call this Excel 1. Now what this will do is you will get the progress bar to show you how long it's going to take to output. And as you can see, my Excel button has now popped up at the bottom with a truly formatable report in Excel. And what I mean by that is these values are physical values. So if we wanted to scroll down to the bottom and add any additional figures, create sums on here, it will in fact run that process. A lot of Excel formats were only text, which caused it to be a little bit problematic when wanting to manipulate the data. And the great thing is about the export to Excel is that it's completely separate to Pegasus. So once it is in Excel, you can do whatever you wish and it doesn't affect the system. As well as exporting to Excel, so we'll have a look at another report. And let's say we want to look at the order listings report in sales order processing, and I actually want it to publish it to screen. So a bit of a larger report, and as you can see, the progress bar runs, and that wasn't available in Opera. So we would be really maybe taking a little bit of a guess of how long a report would take to process. Now, as this creates, and obviously the output is created, it puts it to screen. And there may be options in here where you might have had to print this out historically because you couldn't then continue processing. And this is again where Opera 3 has enhanced this functionality, where I can continue to have this report on screen and actually continue processing. So we can come into sales order processing. We might want to look at ORD 00462. So let's find our document. I think it's possibly because it's already been delivered, but you'll see that then you can then continue to look at the orders. We can edit orders and continue to process, with that entire screen being available to us as a report the whole time. And we can generate multiple reports, so we could have the order listings report open, we could have our invoice and credit notes report open in the sales ledger. You are no longer held by the functionality of only being able to have those one screens open at any one time, as well as the function to be able to search in these PDFs as well. So if I search for 120, it will show me the amount of times that figure appears, and I can also click an option and it will take me to the page and to that value. So a great function when it comes to searching information and searching data is to publish the report and then use that search functionality as well. I'm going to close out of the report. And that's a lot of the processes in sales and purchase ledgers and the financials. So overall, we obviously have the export to Excel. We've got the additional functionality on the screens. We've got the retrospective debtors and creditors also under debtors reports. We've got retrospective reports. So what this allows us to do is, whereas originally we would just have the debtors report, we can now create it as at a certain date. So 01/01/2018 is when I want to view the debtors report as at that point in time. Again, we have the option to export to Excel, but I'm just going to put it to screen. And here it shows the list as at that date. So again, another great feature, and we have the retrospective creditors report and the retrospective debtors report, both held. The sales is in debtors, and for purchases, it's in the reports section. Now, what we've also got in the nominal is the rectify nominal journals. So if we've created a journal and we need to reverse it, rather than having to recreate the journal, we can actually allow it to run that process for us. So under rectify, we can select our year and period we want to view journals for. So I'm going to keep it to this date and hit select. So these are my journals that have been created. So as I can see here, I've got one for period 11 created by admin. I have the journal number and I have the description. If we go to the details tab, I can then see what was created. So we've got our credit to accruals and we've got our debit to rent and rates. Now it might be there's something wrong with that processing and we need to reverse it. So in Journal tab, what we can do is, while we've got that journal selected, we can select Action and Rectify Complete Journal. And we have a number of options here. We can then say, am I purely reversing it, or is the date incorrect? Do I actually need to repost it with a different date? Possibly. So let's go for the 1st of 12th, 2017 and select OK. Now at this moment in time, that period has been blocked for posting, which is actually, with regards to our open period accounting, also that's been brought into Opera 3. So I am going to untick that option and purely allow the system to reverse that posting. What we then have is status as rectified. If we close, because we just need to refresh that list, as you can see, we have the admin as the rectified journal, and we also have the reversal. And if we take a look at the details, we've then got our debit to accruals and our credit to rent and rates. And that can be obviously shown throughout the nominal ledger. So it's a great option in terms of quickly identifying and correcting errors. It might well be, for example, that there's a physical line on the journal itself that only needs to be amended. In that case, what we can do is we can select details, select our line, and select rectify current line. And possibly I want this to go to a different cost center or the whole rent and rates file itself, or I can delete this out and select the F4 key pull a full list. So that line has now been affected. So if we close and refresh our list again, we have our rectified original journal. We then have the journal of which physically reversed that. And then from our reversal, we have a reanalyzed line where we've moved that value to a different account. So some great quick functions within the journal functionality in Rectify that allows us to quickly amend and reverse journals. Now, obviously we had the option, and I mentioned open period accounting, which is another function within Nominal I'd like to go through as a quick refresher. Does anybody, however, have any questions so far on anything we've covered? Okay, again, a quick reminder that chat is available. So within the Nominal, as standard, we really use closed period accounting. So postings only to the date where the Nominal is open are available. However, what we do have in Opera 3 is a new option for a financial calendar. And what this allows us to do is run open period accounting. So rather than having to close a period only to then allow the transactions through, we can choose which periods and which years are available to post to. Therefore, you can forward post into the nominal ledger and see those figures, as well as obviously backward posted. So what we can do is we can post prior journals to the previous year, and we can post current journals to the current and 3 future financial years. Now, the open period accounting option is quite complex in terms of the availability. So if anybody has any questions on this area, please get in touch and we can certainly run through the full functionality of it. But it's just a reminder that if it's something you would be interested in terms of changing how the nominal does post and allow postings into closed or open periods, this option is available in Opera 3. Now, for many people, that covers a lot of information, and hopefully we've covered a few elements that aren't used very often. But the next one is also just a quick reminder that as of next year, majority of companies who are processing and working will be required to submit their VAT online through an actual program to the HMRC gateway. So the gateway will be closing for manual submissions. So within Opera 3, what we do also have is the ability to submit our VAT online. If you already have the payroll module, you may be aware of the Online Filing Manager, which is an application that comes with Opera and allows us to make that connection to the government gateway. Within our administration section, what Opera 3 has done is split out the VAT processing. So what we do now have in VAT is the ability to run our VAT reports separately without having to get people out of the system to access that area. And we have some great detailed or summary reports based on your VAT transactions. So if we run VAT report and we have a look at either a VAT period ending date or a tax point date, I'm going to go for VAT period ending and select OK. Again, we have the export to Excel option. And we have a full VAT audit trail, again of which is available to search. So the reporting in the VAT has been highly changed in terms of having more flexibility to run these reports without being notified that you need to get people out of the system to do so. The VAT processing has then been amended. So this area does still require people to be potentially out of the system when it comes to amending physical records. What we do have is a VAT Return Adjustment. What that allows us to do is make adjustments to the VAT return that don't necessarily affect our physical ledgers. Possibly an error, possibly a manual transaction needs to be added. So as we can see, we've got our tax point and transaction date. We've got the ledger, which is really truly just the transaction type of where that falls. We've got an account if you wish to use the account, and we've also got a reference. We then have the VAT details itself. So is it home country? Is it sales? And what of these options do we want to choose? And they can then say, well, it's £100 goods and £20 VAT. It might just be VAT. So we could remove the goods and purely just post a VAT line. Select OK to that option, and it posts a VAT return adjustment. So it's a very quick and easy way to amend the VAT return if there's something that does need to be added. But what that brings us on to is then the VAT Online. So the VAT return option has always been available in Opera 2 and Opera 3, and that has not changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my dates to be the 31st. I'm going to commit my VAT, and I'm also going to create the HMRC upload file. So this is confirming that the information I am going to send, I do want to submit online. Now, obviously, a number of checks would need to be done before this to ensure you're happy with the figures that are going to be submitted. So I'm going to say I've done that and I'm ready to proceed forward. As I don't want to print it to file, I'm going to save the file of the VAT return that's going to be created. That's just the report, it's not the HMRC output. And our VAT return is now completed. So back in VAT processing, I can then choose my VAT Online. And what this does is, as at my VAT date, we have our previous values and we have the values that are ready to submit. And what you can see on here is these figures are available to edit in case there are any external applications that obviously aren't logged in Opera that you need to include in these submissions when you send them to HMRC. What we then have is we then have a notes section, which allows us to add any notes to this, and we can hit process. Do I want to create my VAT 100 submission? Yes, I do. It's confirming then where this file has been created and the file name. And it then confirms we need to use Online Filing Manager to submit that return. Now, the Online Filing Manager is a very quick application in terms of what's required to be installed, and it's installed on individual PCs. So what I'm going to do for the purposes just to show you how quick and easy Online Filing Manager is to install, within my installation folder for the Pegasus download, I have the ability to install Online Filing Manager, of which is a next, and install. It installs it to the default location where Pegasus is, and it is on an individual PC basis. And the reason why I emphasize that is it just means that it isn't controlled by any data, and the only information you actually need in this application is your HMRC government ID and password for your physical HMRC submissions. Okay, so our install's finished. We've then got an application on our desktop called Pegasus OFM, and within here we've got the Online Filing Manager. And again, all you need in order to run this application is within Details and User, you need your HMRC ID, and you also need your password to hand when it comes to the submission. So I'm going to create a dummy one. And hit save. So what I can then do is in processing, send to government gateway, I have VAT return. And then select next, and I need to browse to the location where that file has been saved. So it gave us a location, and it is always stored in that same process. So if it ever comes to on a monthly basis, this file location will be saved. We only choose the folder because when we hit next, it will pick up the VAT return. We hit next again, it confirms the figures that are in that return that's going to be sent to the HMRC. And next again, it then asks for my password for the HMRC gateway. Now, obviously, these were fake details, so I don't have a password. But what will then happen is the HMRC gateway will be contacted and that information will be submitted. You will then receive, because we added an email address to the user, a confirmation via email that that has been received, exactly the same as you do payroll if you do use the payroll module. So it is a very quick and simple process to use Pegasus Opera 3 to submit your VAT returns online. So that really brings us to the end of our refresher course on the Opera 3 functionality. So again, thank you very much for being with me for the hour in terms of hopefully learning some new options or quick changes that we can make to enhance our functionality. Does anybody have any questions at all? Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody's time. I'll now end the webinar. This will be recorded if anybody does wish to rewatch it, and we're doing some great webinars in the next coming months as well, so stay tuned for those, and thank you very much.